I love how you say recording now, and then immediately afterwards it's like recording in progress. I know. He just told me. Thank you.
It's just confirming that you are listening to what I was saying.
So
You
what?
don't. Yeah, exactly. Um, books are not something I like reading. I'm going to say this now, even though we're going to be talking about a book, and even though I wrote a book, and even though I listen to articles, I don't like reading. I'm just putting that out there to start with. Let's see John's face.
So why did you did you decide to write one?
That is a great question. And I should have a really good answer for this, but to be honest, I don't. The best answer I have, and the reason that I wrote the book, was I wanted a different challenge. I wanted a different experience. I wanted to do something I was uncomfortable with. And I was approached by Pact to write a book about Notion. And I said yes. But I didn't really understand what that meant to start with. Going to be completely honest, I had no idea what it meant to write a book. I knew obviously writing pages of a book and some sort of outline, and that was it. I was like, yeah, let's do this. Do you have any questions about my initial thoughts about writing a book before I go on a bit of
a? Apart from why the heck you decided to do it, that was one.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that confused me with you. It's like, how did you try and navigate? I mean, I know because I was the technical writer, or reviewer, or whatever the freaking heck I was called.
You had a title.
Yeah, I had a title which meant nothing because the marketing department completely forgot I existed the moment.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. Anyway, beside the point, it's going to be a ranty video. I feel.
Oh yeah, there's going to be some snide, sly comments where things were mistakes were made. Let's leave it there. Right.
Yeah. So, what did you hope to achieve by writing a book about Notion in particular?
I like that question. What did I hope to achieve? The first thing was an experience of writing a book. So I knew when I finished my master's degree that I wanted to write a book, but I had no idea how, when, what, who, where about a book. I knew literally nothing apart from you write stuff down and you go to a publisher and publish it. The academic world is very different in publishing articles because you have to go to certain journals and be like, can you publish my article? And then they all read through it and then they will critique it. And depending on the clarity, I guess, or the quality of the journal, you may be more stringently reviewed. So you say to, I don't know, 10, 15 different journals, hey, here's my article. Would you let me publish it? And a lot of them say no. And then they sort of say, oh, you need to edit this, you need to edit that. And they go through things like that. And I was like, is a book the same? It's not the same, by the way. Far easier. So I wanted to understand that. And then I also wanted to understand, because most of the writing that I had done previous to writing this book was, here's a topic. So here's the introduction, here's a lit review, here's a methods, a discussion, limitations, maybe results and conclusion, which is what the Mose is. It's basically a load of articles which go through those processes. A book isn't that. A book is a story. The Notion book isn't quite a story in the traditional sense, in like, here's a narrative around a person or around a problem or a situation or something. It's a tactile book. It's a very much if you need to learn this thing, go to this chapter. It does take you through the journey of a learner, but yeah.
I think that was a really, if I was in your shoes, all the publishing issues aside, I don't know whether I would have done a book on Notion. I mean, I am writing a book, but I'm going to self-publish. Oh my God, I'm self-publishing. I am just self-publishing.
It's much easier.
Yeah. And in fact, from the research that I've done, it's actually better in almost every single way to self-publish, unless you are huge. And I mean huge. And even then, it's not necessarily going to be as valuable as you think it is. And in fact, it can just be a right pain in the backside from experience of what we dealt with, and also from other clients that I've spoken to.
I think what I would say with the self-publishing and the getting someone else to publish it for you, I think from my experience, yes, there were lots of like issues, frustrations, and hiccups along the way, but I learned those while someone else had all the stress, like they had to deal with all the stress about it. So from a beginner's perspective, writing a book, it's quite nice to have someone else do a lot of the stuff that I don't know about.
Yes.
And I didn't have to pay for it. There's no financial burden on me. And it's just like, oh, there's all these things I need to consider. Okay, so when I go and write my book, I have an understanding of the book process. So even though it's full of friction, so much learning, which I think you've sort of taken from our experience and gone your way.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It did help me clarify that I wanted to self-publish, because I feel by self-publishing that I can just do it in my own time. There is less, like, I think from what I understand, it's not just one company, the company that we did it with, that had the same problems. I think it just is the industry in general is really messy. Which
That's what I've heard as well.
Yeah, like, which for Notion consultants, hey, maybe you should go into, helping. No. It would be quite interesting to see that, actually, more people doing that, because it's quite a messy thing. But what were
just for clarity, it's why he said Notion consultants, it's not necessarily the business side of it themselves, it's the organizing of the business themselves. Most of them, because there are a variety of departments, there are a variety of people involved, and there's lots of different things that need to be checkboxed and gone through. The organizing system behind a couple of companies that I've spoken to, well, I've spoken to people that have worked with a couple of different publishers. There's 4 in total that I can think of. I don't want to name them all, but there are very similar issues which Notion could solve. Which I was ironic.
Any form of organizational software could solve, but I think Notion would be a really good one because there's so much fluidity. That's something I was surprised at, is how much movement there is in the case of writing a book. Like, if you go via a publisher, it's like, oh, well, we need it by this date. Well, I can't make it by this date. Okay, then that's fine. It's like, oh, it was very fluid, which was helpful because, it was very interesting. The process was interesting. And yes, I did learn a hell of a lot. I'm intrigued at, like, the choices that were made around actually writing a Notion book, because I am not sure it was the right medium after being part of the process with you, of like, and also the fact that it's now out in a month on Amazon.
End of the month. End of
this month, it's out, and Block by Block has just come in and gone, hey, here's a ton of new stuff coming.
Yeah.
Have fun with that. The whole database section is literally null and void now.
It's funny, like I knew that going in. I knew that going into writing the book that it was going to be out of date as soon as it was published. And the reason I carried on going through was, one, I didn't know about the database update at the time of obviously starting the book. And I found out about halfway through writing the book that they were going to do this update. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had 2 thoughts about it. One was, oh my God, this book's a waste of time. I'm just wasting loads of effort. Which I think is a fairly valid thought. But the second one is, well, actually, when you look at the functions of what I'm speaking about in the book, they don't change. The filters don't change, the sorts don't change, the views don't change. It's just some added features into those sections. So, for example, while I was writing the book, the group feature in the databases came out. So I had to add that in while I was writing the book, which was one of those issues that I knew was going to happen. There were going to be updates. Some of the screenshots I would imagine are going to be outdated soon, because obviously the look changes. The different the dark mode is obviously now darker than it was. Those sorts of things. And although they are aesthetic changes, and although a lot of the function changes again are additions, because it's an app and a software, it's always moving forwards. So I see it in 2 ways. People that buy the book, I think, are more likely to just look at the tactile, like, how do I do this thing, rather than all the other stuff that's added to it. But I do recognize that more advanced users will be like, where's this? Where's this? Where's this? Which is where I guess like sequel 2 comes in. And this is where my like, oh yeah, thinking came in. When I look at academic books, like textbooks, what's this one called? A Student's Handbook of Cognitive Psychology is the book I'm currently reading. This is edition 5. This isn't an app. This isn't software. This is just the way people are thinking. And this is like 1,200 pages long. And this series of book has been going for 20 years. Some series have been going for far, far longer. And that's not an app. That's thinking. And thinking changes in like minutes. So it made me realize, well, if they've got books on things that are old, like people are still writing articles and books about things that have been disproven, learning styles, Feynman technique, and they have been disproven.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Is the Feynman technique not real?
Oh no, the technique is real. It's just not backed by science. Yes. So, but those things are still spoken about, and I was like, I'm writing a book. I might like I can associate it with all these other books that are static, which is one of those things that I realized when communicating information is static as soon as you've shared it. As soon as you share something, it's static. So instead of it being, oh yeah, my book's out of date now, it's everything I share is out of date now. So how do I keep it dynamic? That's why I share my notes. And this is something that I realized while I was writing the book and while I was tackling these questions. And that's where I'm at now. I'm at a point now where everything I publish, I know is static unless I'm adding to it, which is only my notes. Everything else is just a static point in time, which if you've seen my video on systems theory and Zettelkasten, that was one of the things that he speaks about in his systems theory, complexity theory, in that organization, environments change, systems change and evolve, but your notes don't unless you add to them.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I'm kind of slowly, I always knew it, but it's like being able to explain it clearer of the fact that obviously my name is Simplicity Specialist, but simplicity is not simplicity, as I've said before. It is actually a lot of complexity because things change in a static. And I think there is a wonderful shift, which I'm slowly noticing around business and productivity, which is the spaces that I inhabit most of all, of how we're now shifting to more complexity rather than more simplicity. We want to feel like it's easy and it's effortless, but the complexity is coming in more because life is a little bit weird.
So I'm intrigued by that. So for reference, meanings are in people, not in words. That's where the meanings section came from. And I think this is what we're sort of moving towards. When you say complexity, what do you see as complex? What's making it more complex? What tangibly is changing?
I think it's there is an inherent disorganization. Our brains are not exactly well organized. Well, mine certainly isn't. Like naturally, there is no, everything kind of happens and they all connect in their own way, but it's not in the way that we force. We want to force that. I love how your face is like, no, what are you talking about? I think there is an inherent, like, there are lots and lots of things happening at once that we cannot really control. Or we have, limited control over, to use the correct term. And what I'm actually saying, having limited control over these things, but these pieces just fall into its own structure. And what simplicity deems is that simplicity is often seen as minimalism, but they are nowhere near the same. They are like completely not the same at all. No, I think we already did an episode on that one, on that rant. And simplicity is embracing the complexity. I think that's kind of what I'm saying, because things just move and they eventually find their way into a place.
The reason my face is going is like this discussion right here epitomizes one of the disagreements I had with a presenter that I was listening to. So a bit of backstory. Sports coaching, skill acquisition is a field. There was an individual that was presenting about skill acquisition. They disagreed with the different theoretical approaches to skill acquisition. They said, no, terminology, don't need it. It's a waste of time, essentially. I disagreed with that. And the two different theoretical approaches meant a lot. And in practical application, there were differences. And this individual was basically saying that it's making things too complicated for coaches. And which is why I asked you about complexity, because I think complexity comes in different forms. The way that and the way that you expressed it is how I see complexity, which is multiple interacting parts, like simultaneously needing some sort of explanation. Which the complexity, therefore, is dependent on your prior knowledge, again, depending on your approach, your prior knowledge or the information you have and how your ability to collect it together into a schema or whatever you want to call it, again, depending on your approach, how easy that is. So cognitive load theory is one way to express this, in that if you've got 5 elements, element interactivity, 5 elements, it could be really, really complex. But if all 5 of those elements you've already processed in your head before, it's actually only 1. So it can become easier if you've already processed the information before. And when you said there are lots of moving parts that haven't been organized, the way I see that is people are trying to, this is my interpretation of what you said, people are trying to organize multiple pieces of information that they haven't processed yet, but they're trying to process it all at the same time. And they're just like, I don't know.
Yeah, that and what people think, what I've noticed is people think that being able to process all that information at the same time is productivity. When it's not.
But it's not. No, it's not.
It's nowhere near that. Productivity is not being able to process hundreds of things. That doesn't make any freaking sense.
And this is where those theoretical approaches, which I'm not going to go into because it's not the time, drastically differ. Because according to one approach, you want to process all this stuff. Yeah, that's productive, but you can't do that. You physically cannot do that. It's impossible. Your brain does not let you do it. It's not, oh yeah, I can sort it. No, your brain does not let you multitask. You cannot do it.
This is where
you fundamentally cannot do it.
And that's the thing. The traditional view of productivity is you can. The traditional viewpoint of productivity is you should and you can, so do it.
The book, like, and this is where I mean by theoretical approaches. A lot of people assume, because of the way it's spoken about generally, oh yeah, we remember this, our working memory, that long-term memory, this cognitive psychology, that. They don't say that, but that's basically what they're implying, information processing. And because it's just engrossed in the way that we speak, a lot of us assume cognitive psychology is true, which a lot of elements are. Neuroscience, neuropsychology, loads of other elements and stuff. But we assume all these things are true. And then we're like, oh, well, I can't do this because of this, or productivity needs to look like that because I assume this. No, no, not necessarily. There are other opinions, there are other views. And you don't have to completely like upend your thinking and be like, oh, wow, I need to completely change it. Just challenge your thought a little bit and be like, oh, okay, what is this working memory thing? Is this a thing? Just for like train of thought. Working memory, there are 12 different models of working memory. There's not a, oh, this is how working memory works. There are 12 different models, and they're the ones they're the ones that have been spoken about quite extensively. Then there are other theories and other hypotheses, and working memory has long-term working memory as well, which is different to long-term memory, right? And everyone's like, oh yeah, I remember this stuff, or I'm processing. What does processing mean? Are you processing in working memory or long-term memory, or long-term working memory, or which model are you using? You're not processing it all. You're trying to remember it all whilst trying to process something else. They're two different things.
Yeah, and that is something that when I work with clients, I make them not do as best as possible, because it's just a waste of bandwidth. If you believe that, it is a waste. And we have tools and solutions that help us embodied cognition.
I was going to say extended cognition.
Yeah, embodied, extended. They switch them out when they feel like it. No one is clear on what it is.
I think it's like the 4 E's of cognition. We'll go with that.
Yeah, the 4 E's of cognition. And I think it's the case of like not saying you're all wrong, because unfortunately the brain is not that simple. It's actually ridiculously complicated and no one knows the real truth. Look back to our first episode to our definition of truth.
Meaning. I think meaning is better than definition, because
meaning of truth. Yeah,
it's a working definition, so everyone's going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
Philosophical approach. Ludwig.
Lovely.
I could go on a tangent, but I'm not going to.
Huh?
I could go on a tangent, but I'm not going to.
I know you could. What a surprise.
Back to the book with the notion.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that, weren't we?
Yeah, the complexity of writing the book, because obviously lots of moving parts, lots of moving, things moving in Notion and changing and evolving, and you having a static opinion. With my notes, my dynamic notes, I've actually recently changed my website, which mimics this philosophy, in that my blog posts, what I realized whilst writing this book, I realized my blog posts are static posts. That's all they are. They are static. This is what happened this day, or this is my current understanding of this thing. And that's what it was. And I realized my notes are dynamic posts, because they are being changed. They are being added to literally every time I see something. A recent video that I shared on YouTube has a plugin called Update Time on Edit. So I can see when I last updated the thing, which blog posts, you have to manually do that, which is just a pain in the bum. So I've changed my website in that I have I'm gonna call them main articles. They're not main articles, they're just working notes that have some sort of substance to them. And I've put them in there and be like, there's these things. So instead of looking at just static notes, you're now looking at dynamic notes which link to everything else, which I think would be the most appropriate way to share a book, an application, a tool, a way of thought. But there is no easy narrative with dynamic articles, which is where I think a book or something that is linear comes in. It's very hard to go into the Notion help pages and go, I'm going to read all of these. Because you just don't know.
Yeah. I think it was understanding, like, do you think you'll go back in and update the book?
No, not at all. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the other books around different applications, like anything for dummies, really, like that whole series, I think I read an Excel book from like 2011, and it still had information that was current in the recent Excel. It looked different and the buttons were in different places, but it was still current information. So it didn't become redundant. Some of the features were outdated, yes. But as someone that is using technology now, all I needed to do was like, oh, this bit is out of date. I'm going to look for the update, which you could Google, which obviously everyone on Google or the internet, you can see those updates. So unless there is a massive, drastic change to the way everything works in Notion, and it's not just updates here and there, there's no real need. So maybe in like 3 years, when Notion looks completely different, there would need to be another update. Would I need to do that? Probably not, because Notion are big enough themselves to do it, to be honest. Like, if they wanted a book, they could hire someone to write a book, or the team do the book. They have obviously made a conscious decision not to do it right now, which makes sense.
It really does make sense thinking about it, because they are in this rapid growth phase where loads of things are happening. I think that's where, for me, I don't think I would have gone down the same road as you. I think, like, talking about static and dynamic, I think it kind of brings on the topic of courses a little bit more. Of like,
I was thinking
courses,
the same.
Yeah, courses are dynamic. They are genuinely dynamic. There is a static element to them, but they have a higher level of dynamism. More dynamic. Yeah.
Dynamism.
Dynamism. Yeah. Is that?
Yeah.
Right.
I know. When I first heard the pronunciation, I was like, what? And I was like, actually, now that makes sense, because you can't really say dynamoism, because that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
English is hard.
Dynamism. Yeah, well, we have to complicate things.
Yeah, well, and on the line of courses, I think there are static elements to courses and dynamic elements to courses, which is what makes the course industry so complex. And I'm going to say complex because there are so many different elements. Like, do you do a MOOC? What type of MOOC do you do? How long do you like leave it for? Is it 6 modules? Is it 8 modules? Is it 6 weeks, 4 weeks? How many lessons are there? Are there like 200 lessons that are really short? Are there 4 lessons that are really long? Are there sessions, like live sessions? How long are the live sessions? What timings are the live sessions? And all those small little elements, plus like, are there follow-up emails? Are there not follow-up emails? Do you have to get it done in this 6 weeks? Or is it lifetime access? And all these small moving elements have different interactivity with static and dynamic movement element interactivity. I did a video about cognitive load theory on my 3rd channel, I guess you could say, and I did loads of rhymes in it. Oh, it's so much fun. And I rhymed interactivity with subjectivity. I was like, that's so cool. But yeah, really massive side tangent there. But yeah, so I think there are lots of static and dynamic moving elements, and the more static elements you have in whatever product you have, the more likely it will be outdated, but the more helpful it may be for people looking at it, because it's just a this, rather than going this, but also all these things, this, but maybe some of these things, this, but also some of that stuff, because dynamic typically has more moving parts, which is more elements. Finding that balance, difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my big problems when I made a course or make courses or programs or digital products, is the fact that accepting how much dynamism there is and it being enough.
Yeah. So is there anything else with the book making process you want to talk about, or should I lean towards some of the updates in Notion and speak about them, what they were talking about block by block?
No, I'm good.
We've covered the book, yeah.
It's coming out at the end of the month. If you want to go buy it, go buy it. But I don't think most people here will be in quite the right audience for it now. But if you're new to Notion, you want to kind of get a basic outline, then it's all right.
Basic outline. Have you seen the formula chapters?
Okay, fine. The formula chapters are pretty gnarly as well, but
okay, so block by block. Obviously, as Notion ambassadors, we had access to some of this stuff a little bit early, so we could beta test stuff. Beta testing is great fun. Side comment, I'm beta testing for other apps at the moment, and some of the tests, I'm like, what the F have you done with the tool? You've broken it. But yeah, I'm excited in the next couple of weeks beta testing a tool that I'm using, which I may talk to John about afterwards. But yeah, so yeah, with block by block.
You guys don't know, no.
With block by block, there were lots of features that I was familiar with, some of them not so much, because Notion isn't my personal tool of choice. So yeah,
this is where I can say quite a bit, because I have played with
what are you interested in the most?
I think it is the 2 things. One is the actually, quite frankly, all of them. I was there like, no, just a couple of things. No, all of them. I think synced databases, for one, are going to be nuts. They're going to be crap when they first come out. I just feel that they're not going to be that good when they first come out. But as they develop them, I think we may get some form of recurring tasks built in. I think that's what they're planning. I hope that's what they're planning, because that really will make Notion a project manager, because until they have those features, they are not a project manager or a task manager. I wish they were, but they're not. We're hacking it. Let's be real. But it works for our brains.
I was going to say, that was my first thought when I heard about the sync databases. I was like, oh, that means Google Calendar, which means recurring tasks. How do they do that? They must be bringing it in some way, somehow.
I hope they are. Because I genuinely think that will take Notion into a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that lightly. I think it will take Notion to a different level if they have different database types. And I also think part of their movement to be a little bit more public with what their updates are might possibly have something to do with the fact that Coda's done a ton of really nice updates.
Yes.
And they are
catching
up to Notion really fast, to the point where I was like, I might go look at that again. I genuinely was like, I might look at that again now that we've got, because one of the big criticisms, apart from the price, because goodness me, it's very expensive for what it is. But anyway, one of the big criticisms I had of Coda was the lack of columns and the lack of pages like Notion has. And now they've got that, and I'm just like, oh, am I gonna go play? Because that.
The thing with Coda is because their formulas have always been better than Notion, and they've got formulas that can go inline, which Notion's just not possible at all. So you have automatic calculations inline, you have buttons, which again doesn't do anything. You've got triggers. So the more automated elements and calculation elements of just writing out a doc and putting essentially formulas and code inside of words, inside of text, is far better in Coda. But the look is still a bit janky. I'm going to use that word.
It is. It's not as nice and it's not as clean as Notion, which is the frustrating part. I haven't played with Coda enough to comment enough of it yet. I just saw a video, watched the video, and was like, oh, now I'm intrigued. Now that's interesting. I like that. That still looks hideous.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but I feel that I'm very much excited about the new databases.
Yes.
They are very nice. It really does clean up Notion dashboards, like with the fact that you can see your tasks and projects and multiple databases at the same time in one single view. I've been playing with that, and that has been amazing to be able to switch. So for example, like my Notion system's changed quite a bit since I should probably do an update video if I can be asked. Like I have a whole new kind of setup that I'm playing with. It's an evolution of my old one, obviously, because everything is kind of built on top of one another, but I'm able to see just in one page all of my tasks, all of my events, all of my projects, all of the documentation I'm writing, as well as another section to see all the kind of active hubs in my business, all in one view, all in one embed, which is really darn nice. And the fact that you can change filters and not mark them as like save for everyone, it can be custom on each other's pages filter. Wow, that was English. I think that's really powerful as well. That combined with groupings, and it just looks nicer. Although, one freaking request, please make it so that we can change the darn names just by clicking on them instead of having to click on it, then press rename, because oh my gosh, that's annoying. But anyway. Yeah,
I think when I first saw them, I absolutely hated them. And I think I'm just going to get a similar response to a lot of people using Notion, because it is drastically different in the way that it works. Like you have to click in different places and then you get a different view and you're like, what is this? Where is that? Obviously, some of the icons have changed as well. And it's a bit disorientating. And for people that aren't that comfortable with tools and tech, and when you suddenly see an update like this, it's not that the features have changed drastically. There are some added features like we were just going over, but it looks different. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll go click over there. Wait, what? Why is it so big? Why is it so small? Why is it to the left? Why isn't it over there? And something else as well that I had to get my head around was the filters. I'm so used to the filters being in this one way and doing this thing, and then they're suddenly like boxed over there, like in the side and on this small little circle thing. You're like, what? And I didn't like that. And to be honest, I still don't like it. I prefer the way that it was to start with, but it's probably because I've been using it for so effing long.
Yeah, I think it's more for us because we've been using Notion for so long, it sucks. But I think from a user experience for new people, it is so much better. And I think their focus of this is to make things like linked databases way more obvious that they are powerful.
I was going to say, I think, I was going to say, I think from all of the marketing that Notion do, linked databases is something that they treat as this like advanced, difficult thing, which working with some clients is actually overcomplicating it, because when I say, oh yeah, we'll just create a linked database, they go, oh no, we don't need all of that. And I'm like, yes, you do. That's the whole point of Notion. But because it's pushed as this really difficult, complicated thing, it needs to be easier in the actual app. You need to be able to go, oh yeah, that's a linked database now. Which
And
I
I
think
that
databases have tried to, yeah.
Yeah, and I really love that. I think that is going to be so much more powerful, because the moment people realize, when I work with clients and we do a build and I show them how that works, oh wait, you just pulled that in there. Is that a new data? No, it's the same one. It's just viewed in different ways, and you can just, and if you don't want to go into the different sections, you can just go to this page and see all of them. Oh, is that face, that literal
light bulb?
Oh shit, that's powerful. Like they cannot believe how powerful it is. And I think by having these updates, it will become clearer.
Yeah, I think it will become clearer and more intuitive, because a lot of people that I work with, when you say, oh, create a linked database, either they push the slash command and then they scroll all the way down to where it is, or they have to type it in. So they have to know what they're looking for, which obviously, if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't find it. Whereas in a database, when you just click on a view and it's asks you which database do you want, it's just there. You don't have to go searching for it. It just tells you which database do you want. And then you question, wait, which database? I can do that. So it's
that was my experience when I did it. I was like, oh, I can. No, really? Oh, it allowed more creativity, which I think Notion need to maximize on. The power of Notion is the fact that it is flexible. It has that creative flair to it.
I would adapt that slightly. I wouldn't say it allows more creativity, because it was still there. I would say it allows more explicit creativity. It's just this is how you, rather than implicit, because linked databases were there, we could do it. It's just you needed to know what you were doing to be able to do it.
Yes. Yeah, I could agree with that. And I guess now it's much easier.
Something that is intriguing on, so a couple of clients I'm working with at the moment is the views are obviously, there's so many different types of views. What one do I pick? How do I pick it? This sort of thing. And the board view, I've absolutely hated the board view ever since it started, because I'm not a Kanban user. Even though I use Kanban and Obsidian, it's not the same.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, it's not the same in Obsidian, because it's literally just a line being moved up or down. There's no real tangible thing that makes it Kanban, because it's going across, but it could quite easily go up and down. And inside of projects, it's just a stage essentially. And even though I'm using the Kanban Obsidian, I'm actually moving away. I'm using tags instead, because I prefer it, because I could just click on the stage, be like, oh yeah, there it is. There's all the search stuff. But the grouping and the subgrouping inside of board views plus formulas for viewing has actually enabled me to create some really, I would call advanced views of information. So just to give an example, there's a stage of a type of job. So I have a filtered database for a type of job, and there are different stages of that job that it needs to go through. But there are different people that work on different jobs. So I have it subgrouped by the people. And then each stage has a certain time limit. So from stage 1 to stage 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, etc. And they need to see how long stage 1 took. So you can have a card in this grid on stage 3 underneath this person, which has been filtered for this job type, that shows job 1, stage 1 took this long because it's calculated through a formula and a date property. So they have all of that information in one view about one job and all the other jobs there associated. So you can see almost everything you want in one view in Notion, which I don't know of any other application that you could do something like that. Even ClickUp with all of its stuff, you'd have to do a fair amount of clicking around, or you'd have to add a lot of settings and change things, and it wouldn't be as flexible with what you can put in the front, because again, because it's a board view, you show which properties you want, which you can create with formulas. Yes, you need to understand how formulas work, but you can basically customize the information that's shown on the card with literally any calculation, any roll-up, anything you want, which I don't know any other project management tool that can do that.
No, there isn't. That's the thing. That is the point.
Yes, that's an extremely advanced use case, and you need to understand formulas and roll-ups and probably relations as well, because you're using roll-ups. And then obviously the filters and the grouping features in views. But most
once you understand that,
But most of that with an update, like the filters, the grouping, and the linked databases, all of that together, that's going to become easier with the new update, which means relations and rollups suddenly be like, oh, that's how they work. That because they can see this database links to this database. Oh, that's the rollup, and they will be able to visually see that links to that. So I think rollups, relations and rollups will become easier to teach and coach and understand as well, which means formulas then become this, instead of it being linked databases, the cap, formulas becomes the cap, which I'm looking forward to.
Which it should be. It should have been from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like formulas, you do not need. They are advanced. They are the kind of niche use cases or specific use cases for specific things. They are not necessary for every person. However, once you reach a certain point and you want really specific things, then Notion becomes insane.
Yeah. I mean,
and it becomes
you could always plug your formula that you stole from me. that formula, by the way, is in the book. That's the formula that I wrote in the book.
Yeah. It's amazing. But it is a really powerful formula.
It
allows you to do
what you want, when you want, display how you want.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think my excitement for Notion is more to make it easier for more people to use, because we are now heading in. Notion is becoming way more mainstream now.
Yes.
Notion is becoming mainstream, which means,
I was going to say, it's becoming so mainstream that like the people that my parents are working with at like normal jobs, I say normal jobs, like in the real world jobs, like my mum works at a post office, and people in the post office are starting to get hold of what Notion is. Like, what's that? Like they're asking questions about it. Yes, it's slightly influenced that I've written a book about it. My mum's talking about it, but you've got people in an Asda shopping center being like, Notion, what's that? Like, and they're genuinely asking those questions, which before, if you mention Notion, like, yeah, whatever.
I'm not really interested in that.
Yeah. So it's exciting. It's going to be interesting to see where the move goes with the like Notion champions, Notion ambassadors, Notion consultants.
Oh, I have so many goddamn thoughts on that I'm just not going to touch.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a bit of a rabbit hole. Maybe we talk about that in the next one. Qualifications, application qualifications, or certifications. Maybe that's the next episode.
Yes, yeah, we'll leave that one there, because otherwise we'll go on to one heck of a tangent.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you don't want to get the book, great. If not, also great. Like there's no need to get it. There's no point in getting it if you know Notion. But what I would say is, when looking for updated information, have a look what version they're using. This is just like not a Notion thing, just a general thing. What version of the application that is usually using when they're talking about it? Some people moan at my videos in Notion that 2 years old. I'm like, the video's 2 years old. Look at the version that I'm using. It's obviously different. So yeah, try and get updated information, dynamic information rather than static. Any last words?
That's good.
Before I kill you.
Mic drop.
End.